This is the book entitled, as you can see on the screen. And in that report, I presented the entire history of this commission from the uprising in 1979 until today. So today, I would like to focus more on our mission today. The mission, or rather our goal, is to renew compassion between the Catholic Church and Orthodox Church. We started this discussion a long time ago. We need to focus more not on what separates us, but on what unites us. And we agreed that the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church would recognize themselves and as sister churches. And now we have to continue our discussion around those issues that remain outstanding. It's our obligation of the Ukrainians, Greek Catholics, to keep in mind that Eastern Catholic churches committed to producing a joint document stipulating how these churches understand the primacy of Rome's bishop, the Pope. And basically, the idea is to promote the idea that was articulated by the Pope in its encyclica. The Orthodox, so-called smaller churches, under the guidance of the Romanian Orthodox Church, but the Slovaks, the Czechs, and some Polish Orthodox churches were also there, came up with the following solution. All patriarchs, including the Bishop of Rome, will pray for one another. All patriarchs, including the Bishop of Rome and their churches, will commemorate one another and will mention one another during liturgies. All patriarchs, including the Bishop of Rome, will do the same sanctuaries. And finally, we will not delve deeper into all the conflicts and disputes of the second millennium. So it's all about putting aside any emotions that stem from our history. We also discussed such issues as authority, power, sobornost, synodality, collegiality within the church. But first and foremost, we placed emphasis on the role of the Bishop of Rome, his primacy, and the issue of the Pope's universal jurisdiction. There was a heated debate about the difference between autonomy, affiliation, and autocephaly. The code of the Eastern churches described these churches as ecclesia sui juris. But the Latin word sui juris means ecclesia autonoma. So basically, it means that they are autonomous. So we agreed to differentiate between different degrees of relative and restricted autonomy of these churches in their right to compassion with the Bishop of Rome. Patriarchies, supreme archbishops, metropolises, and other churches. It goes without saying that there is a distinct difference between the power exercised by the Bishop of Rome and those Eastern churches that are part of sui juris. But all Eastern Catholic churches acknowledge that the Pope is instantia suprema, so the highest instance, because this is the way it has been since the times of the apostles. Back then, they also appealed to the Bishop of Rome. The Pope intervenes only when this higher power is missing. And this way, the Pope becomes the guarantor of the canonical functioning of synodality, unity in faith, and canonical arrangement of the Eastern Catholic churches. And if you have the text in front of your eyes, then please transition to page 21. Nowadays, Eastern Catholic churches, and this is something that is very important, do not acknowledge so-called uniatism either as a method or an example of unity between Rome and Orthodox churches. And I believe that it's one of the greatest accomplished of the Eastern Catholic churches. We're not really called uniates or traitors or regenerates anymore. We're just dubbed the Eastern Catholic churches. And we also discussed the issue of the mission of the Eastern Catholic churches, which means that the Eastern Catholic churches play an important role in this successful ecumenical dialogue. The existence of Eastern Catholic churches, their development in compassion with the Apostolic Church of Rome, should be recognized and preserved by both Catholics and the Orthodox. And it means that all rights and obligations of these churches have to be acknowledged, all of them. Moreover, their compassion with the Bishop of Rome is the guarantee of their orthodoxy and their Catholicism, the way it was back in the first millennium. Because we know that the notions of Catholicism and orthodoxy are not juxtaposed, but they should be complementary. Transition to page 22, and I will continue with those pieces that are highlighted in yellow. The history of the church demonstrates two ecclesiological tendencies: sobornost in the East and primacy, with special emphasis on the primate in the West. Any restoration of full compassion between the Catholic and Orthodox churches will require the reinforcement of synodal structures on both sides. And we also need to renew the understanding of the primate as in service of compassion between the churches. We also need to rethink this link between the primate and synodality. This premise pertains not only to the Orthodox and Catholic dialogue, but it is also relevant for the interchurch level, as demonstrated by synods of Catholic bishops in Rome in 2015 and 2016, and the Orthodox Synod on Crete in 2016. Both Orthodox and Catholics are facing the challenge of improving the primate and synodality. It would be useful and productive for both churches to approach these problems jointly, to jointly craft some solutions. because this is something that is part and parcel of this exchange of gifts. In 2017, some decisions were made. How will this process be positioned? The exact role of the Bishop of Rome within the United Catholic and Orthodox Church. This is something that we need to understand at universal level, global level, provincial level, and local level. But we need to demonstrate continuous regard for the rights of the local churches. And now I would like to articulate some other important issues. These are the issues that need to be resolved in the near future. There's another difficulty. It's not only that we, the Catholics and the Orthodox, do not share compassion, but there's also a shortage of unity within Orthodoxy itself. There is this perpetual rivalry between the sees of Constantinople and Moscow. And unfortunately, this rivalry is ever growing. The Moscow Patriarchy does not want to be engaged in ecumenical dialogue. And even if they participate, they want things to be their way. This is something that they did in Belgrade, in Ravenna. And the same held true of the last coordination meetings. The Bulgarian Church has not participated in the Commission meetings for decades. The position of the Georgian Church is as follows. They come and then they leave, and later they claim that they do not acknowledge the resolutions of the Commission. But worst of all, the Moscow Patriarchy and the Russian Orthodox Church always utilize the arguments of power and strength, that we are the strongest, we are the most affluent, and they think that whatever is proclaimed by the Russian Orthodox Church has to be accepted by all the other Orthodox churches. So unfortunately, it's true that Orthodox autocephalic churches are split at least into two groups. Those that follow the prescriptions of the Universal Patriarchy, and there's also a group of churches that are congruent with the Russian Orthodox Church. And most likely, it does not facilitate ecumenism. Page 24. We must put in effort to translate into reality the full orthodoxy and Catholicism of the Church. And we need to do so while preserving compliance with all rights and obligations of local churches sui juris, both Catholic and Orthodox. Secondary, apart from the issue of primacy, we also need to delve deeper into the fundamentals of sobornost, synodality, collegiality, solidarity, and subsidiarity of the Church. These are crucial principles that we need to be guided by. At least in the case of the Ukrainian Church, and this is something that is gaining in popularity, if I can put it this way. So at least in the case of the Ukrainian Church, we need to strive for achieving the simultaneous compassion of the Kyiv Church with the See of Rome and Constantinople, because this is something that was set forth in the ecumenical concept of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church back in 2015. There's a quote in the text, but I will not read it out. I want to encourage all of you to read the book by Václav Grinevich. He was a member of our commission from 2000 to 2002, The Challenge of Our Home, Christian Faith in Dialogue. He writes, he writes about this price of hope. And I would like to draw your attention to section 3 of this book. At the very end, he writes, the thought that Ukrainian Greek Catholics can forge some links with the universal patriarchy without severing compassion with Rome evokes an avid interest among the Orthodox. I also want to point out that we are the Catholics, and we should not be fearful of the word autocephaly. When we are talking about our sui juris church, I would like to point out that Iwan and His Grace Patriarch Joseph the Blind called our church autocephalous because autocephaly is not about isolation. I don't really want to use the word independence here because it has some political connotations. But it means that this church is self-governed, but at the same time, it shares compassion with other patriarchies and churches. I will not raise the issue of new patriarchies right now. This is the issue faced not only by our church, but by other churches as well. But there is one extremely important thing that I would like to bring up. Before the collapse of the Soviet Union, we, diaspora representatives, shared prayers. Maybe we cannot share some sanctuaries, but we can have shared liturgies and services. We can do the same with the church marriages, because this is something that is typical of the Orthodox and Catholic Church. So it's not only about praying together once a year when we celebrate the unity of churches. And when the day comes, we need to accept Eucharisty as a sign of this joint desire for reconciliation. We want to pardon one another, we want to reconcile, and we want to commit to living together and having regard for one another. We need to acknowledge the positions of the Catholic and Orthodox churches with regard to the primacy of the Bishop of Rome, but at the same time, we want to do it in this spirit of soborna synodality, collegiality, solidarity, and subsidiarity. I would like to put forward a personal argument as well. So basically, churches can be broken down into two parts: those that want to restore unity and those that are against it. Those that want to restore unity will pray and do everything within their capacity, because this is one of the commandments of Jesus Christ. And those churches that don't want that will not be helped even by God. But there's this English saying, where's a will, there's a way. And this is something that we can gravitate towards and finally achieve if the will is there. We need to recognize that in the first and in the second millennia, we all sinned, both Catholics and the Orthodox. We can be accused of sins of pride and arrogance, desire for power, money, influence, clout, etc. We were not as saint as sometimes we want to depict it. Inquisition, unitism, and some other negative phenomena that we should leave in the past. We cannot change the past, but at the same time, we need to explore our history. My point is that we should not get fixated on historical controversies, because by doing so, we will not change anything. We will just heat up the emotional environment. And there's an important principle that we need to factor in. Churches need to develop with respect for one another. And it's all about our diversity. It's not about uniformitate, it's about multiformitate. And to finish it off, I would like to use the words of Pope Francis. These are the words that he pronounced on the 30th of November 2014 in front of Bartholomew. To preserve the fullness of Christian teaching with fidelity and to complete the reconciliation of Christians from the West and the East, we need to preserve the rich heritage of Eastern churches. And it's not only about liturgical and spiritual traditions. We also need to have regard for the canonical order that regulates the life of these churches. We need to respect this fundamental as a prerequisite for the restoration of full compassion. And this full compassion does not mean either subordination of one to the other. So it's not about submissio, it's not about immersion, it's not about merging, it's more about accepting those gifts that were granted to all these churches by God. In this way, we can reveal this great sanctuary of rescue pronounced by God. And then the Pope continues, I would like to provide you with assurances that if we want to achieve and pursue this goal of full unity, the Catholic Church does not intend to lay down any conditions. And this is something that we need to remind our brothers from the Sea of Rope. And in light of the gospel and biblical readings, and in the spirit of the gospel and experience of the first millennium, we are ready to seek ways that will guarantee our unity. And this is the only thing that the Catholic Church aspires to. And this is the only thing that I, the Bishop of Rome, aspire to. Because I want to achieve churches that reside in love. So this is our roadmap. Thank you very much for your attention. Glory be to Jesus Christ.
Thank you very much for your presentation of the works of this Catholic and Orthodox Commission on these important issues of primacy, synodality, autonomy, autocephaly. I think you have showed very well that these issues concern not only ecumenical dialogue, but also the inner life of Orthodox churches and on Catholic Church. And also you showed very well the specific role of Ukrainian Greek Catholics in the dialogue between Catholics and Orthodox. So many thanks. And now we will hear our second speaker, Reverend Dr. Ihor Shaban, which is the head of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church Commission for Promoting the Christian Unity.
Glory to Jesus Christ. I am greeting everyone, all the participants of our today's conference, the Institute of Ecumenical Studies, with another successful ecumenical week very interesting, vibrant, full of different topics. I was asked today to speak about ecumenical identity of Eastern churches based on the example of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church and our today's updated ecumenical concept that was adopted last year by the synod of our church. So I would like to start from the following statement, that according to the ecumenical concept of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, this church believes it is an Orthodox church in plenary and visible shared Eucharist with the Roman Apostolic See. Its historical times, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church sees at the church of the ancient Kiev or Kiev Metropolitan that was in the shared Eucharist with Constantinople Patriarchate. That is at 988, when Holy Knight Volodymyr, who is equal to apostles, accepted Christianity as official religion for the whole Rus Ukraine or Ruthenian Ukraine. And we know it from the history. After the cleavage between the Christian West and East in 1054, Kievan Church was rarely in direct contradiction with Rome and Constantinople, sometimes trying to initiate and actively support some efforts directed at the renovation of the ecumenical Christian unity. But still, under the circumstances of internal crisis, after the weakening of Constantinople Patriarchate Center and the challenges of the Protestant Reformation and post-Trident Catholicism, hierarchy of the Kievan Church trying to stick to the Florentine Union tradition, to perform Christian Testament, so that all be as one, John 17, verse 11, decided to renovate Eucharistic unity with Rome, but still there are some tendencies. There were some tendencies of the Roman clergy. Roman Apostolic See, in the spirit of post-Trident ecclesiology, formulated its aspiration for unity with the method that was called uniatism, and it was violently criticized by different sides of contemporary ecumenical dialogue. But until now, nobody managed to apply a more efficient example of unity of churches than the model that was the fruit of the Brest unity. Still, some faithful, insisting on the canonical belonging to the Constantinople Patriarchate, tried to aspire for parallel Roman hierarchy in 1620 and official acceptance of the separate confession, 1632. Unfortunately, attempts to unite in the 17th century, to unite the parts of the Kievan Church in under one patriarchate were not successful. Now I would like to turn to the term uniatism, and I would like to refer to a letter written by His Grace Miroslav Ivan Lubachevsky to Cardinal Edward Idris Cassidy, where he mentioned that there is a difference between method and model, оскільки by method we mean some means of unity, while whereas model of unity pertains to the already final result. So to change historical events of the past is not possible, but it is possible to change the so to say consequences of uniatism, and it will be possible even in future. to change the consequences of uniatism. For that, not only Eastern Catholics should take efforts, because they are still seeking for their own spiritual and ecclesiastical legacy. And this is what we are called to by the Second Vatican Council. But also there should be efforts from the Roman See in the direction of changing its relations with the Eastern Catholical churches, so that finally an acceptable ecclesiological model would be created, especially acceptable for the Eastern churches. Under the term uniatism, we also understand the separation of Eastern churches from one monolithic structure. Here, I would like also to mention that apart from the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church headed by the already mentioned His Grace Miroslav Lubachevsky, we are also trying to find ways of reconciliation with the Russian Orthodox Church and with the Constantinople Patriarchate and with the Moscow Patriarchate. While Russia refused to have any dialogue, bishops and theologians of the Constantinople Church, on the contrary, started their dialogue with the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church that used to be fruitful, although not formal and not official. And this dialogue was called the Studiot Group of Kievan Church. This was the group that was aiming at renovation of fully fledged Eucharist with the maternal Constantinople Church, without making any cleavage between Roman Apostolic See and Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. We have to take into account when we talk about the identity of the Ukrainian Eastern churches. For the theology of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, it was and it is important to have this historical contact with the Church of Constantinople, with the maternal church. Being one of the legal heirs of historical Kievan metropoly, this church should continue to foster this Eastern spirituality, theology, canonical right, and order. Besides this, we should not forget that the historical co-Eucharist with the maternal church of Constantinople and the church with the Roman church has been always a very significant characteristic of Kievan church, even at the times of Saint Volodymyr. And this church, according to the words of Pope John Paul II, was Orthodox in its faith and it was Catholic in its love. It is now that the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is in the full shared Eucharist with Catholic Church, and it is really gathering its faith around the successor of Apostle Peter, and it witnesses to its brothers, non-Catholics, that ecclesiastical unity is not just some remote aim, but this is something that Christians can practice already today. Another significant example of ecumenical identity of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is achieving of a shared international commission on theological dialogue between Roman Catholic and Orthodox churches. And this commission should include all the recognized in the world Orthodox and Catholic churches. That's why UGCC is aspiring to implement all the achievements of the ecumenical level for the development of so-called map, how to unite with the Orthodox churches of Volodymyr's baptism. And in that dialogue, probably the most important topics would be the mutual recognition of the sacraments, also possibility of shared prayer, understanding of the authority and synodality of the church, and so on and so on. Taking into account this aim and this aspiration for dialogue, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church officially declares that it welcomes the unity of the churches that had been divided before into one Orthodox Church of Ukraine. This church received from the hands of the Ecumenical Patriarch a Tomos about autocephaly, and it believes that that it is a significant step on the way to achieving internal unity between the Orthodox Christians of Ukraine, and it is also a significant stage in the direction of renovating renewed unity of the Kievan Church. B, taking into account all the achievements of international Catholic Orthodox theological dialogue, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church manifests its readiness to conduct with the Orthodox Church of Ukraine an ecumenical dialogue, and it's actively cooperating, it's actively present in the social life of Ukraine. Besides this, C, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church wishes to cooperate also with the Ukrainian Orthodox Church that continues to be in unity with the Moscow Patriarchate on the basis of mutual respect of historic and ecclesiastical nature of each other. But taking into account the position of non-intrusion into the internal Orthodox misunderstandings that unfortunately exist, Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church is open to dialogue and interaction with all Orthodox churches of Ukraine, regardless of their jurisdiction, because openness and sincere dialogue are significant tools that may help to find mutual understanding and unity. It is worth to mention that UGCC continues to show aspiration to enrich its ecclesiastical thinking through a constant dialogue and co-Eucharist with the Roman Catholic Church and other local churches and communities, which together with the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church make an inalienable part of the Ecumenical Church in unity with the Bishop of Rome, and further ecumenical steps cannot undermine the significance of this unity, and they should be built on, and this desire of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church for the dialogue should be taken into account. So we have to foster the reunion of our Orthodox churches with their unity with the Bishop of Rome and other local churches. Thank you very much.
I think you developed the important role, ecumenical role of Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church in the dialogue, in the ecumenical dialogue, and notably in Ukrainian society. And I retained what you said about the understanding of uniatism as method or model, so that you suggest that uniatism is a dynamic model, and I think that dynamic reality, excuse me. I think it's important to understand this ecumenical role. So we are now, we will hear Reverend Dr. Gabriel Gashem, Professor of Systematic Theology, Editor-in-Chief of the ecumenical French magazine Proche, Orient, Chrétien from Beirut. We will hear you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Are you hearing me well? Is it okay?
Yes, yes.
Okay. First of all, I would like to assure you that we as Lebanese people and church are in our prayers and thoughts with you, Ukrainian people and church, in these historical crucial moments and this unjust war. And we hope that peace will be reestablished as soon as possible for the sake of the whole peoples and for the whole humanity. Second, I would like to apologize not to be with you in person, but I am also glad and to share this panel, and I would like to thank the Ecumenical Study Institute for the invitation. I will start with some remarks, general remarks, and then I will develop just some points because we don't have enough time to go into detail. So I will speak about the ambiguity of our identities as Oriental Catholic churches or Eastern Catholic churches, and our actual situation after the Second Council of Vatican and the reception or non-reception of the document of Balaman. And finally, I would like to abort the challenges of synodality and maybe a dynamic new model of unity as Father Ihor proposed. I will start then with the remarks. I am happy to see that you are approaching the identity issue through mission. The question not only of the Eastern Catholic Church, but the churches is today what for? Churches, what for? For the salvation of the world, for the fulfillment of the kingdom of God, and how? And how? Then our own thinking as theologians is and should depart from the ecclesial identity related to a contextual, actual, historical reality. One of the ambiguities of our identity is due to the multiplicity of components of this ecclesial identity and the ambiguity of what others are calling unionism, and we rejected this nomination, this word of unionism. So what is our mission? And what is determine our identity as Oriental Catholic churches nowadays? In addition to the common mission or the purpose of any church, which is the fulfillment of the unity, Catholicity, holiness, and apostolicity of the local churches, of the church here and now, and the communion all over the world of all local churches. And leading humanity in steps of Jesus Christ by the strength of the Holy Spirit to the heavenly kingdom of the Father, to the eternal life. Our particular mission as Eastern Catholic churches was determined by the Latin missions and by the reunion with Rome. This identity was for centuries, at least 3 centuries, to be a bridge between the Catholicism, the Roman Catholic Church from one side, and the Orthodox Eastern and Oriental churches from the other side. It is well known that many factors, geographical, historical, linguistic, commercial, political, cultural factors played a big role in this movement of reunions with the Roman Catholic Church, in addition to some theological and ecclesiological important factors. But the question for me would be always, what is the specificity of our churches, and what can we today, what we already brought, and what we can today bring to the communion of the churches and the salvation of the world. This is why I would like to speak on behalf of my Greek Catholic Melkite Church. I mean, as a member and a priest of this church, I would say that, first of all, our identity is not so easy to approach. We are Antiochian. We have apostolic roots and tradition. But the question is, how could we today live with this roots and tradition? We also are Chalcedonian. How should we today expose the Antiochian anthropology and its challenges, which, in my opinion, could change a lot in the ecumenical and theological dialogue. We also are Byzantine because of our tradition, our patristic, our liturgy, our way in the adoration of the Holy Trinity. And we have, with other Byzantine liturgical and theological traditions, to bring new reform to the liturgy in order to be more adequate to the reality of our society today, and maybe to approach young people with a new liturgical life in order to be a living water for each one and for our church. We also are Arabs, even those who are Syrian from race, ethnic, or language, or Armenian, or Coptic. But Arabic is not only our common language, it's our cultural wide base. This is the space, this is the environment in which not only we are called to live and to proclaim the gospel, but also to act, to react, to be in relation, and to proclaim the gospel of God. So Arabic for us is more than common language. It is a cultural space common with those who are living in our region. And then we are Catholic. In 2 years, we will celebrate. I don't know if we can use this word of celebration. We will we will commemorate the split of 1724 when a group of Greek Orthodox from Antioch declared their union with the Roman See, with the Pope, with the Roman Catholic Church. It is evident that at that time we had a lot of illusions about unity, about salvation, about the exclusivism in soteriology, about communion, about synodality. And little by little, we discovered that it is a big challenge, a challenge of tension, permanent tension between different identities, but also between different traditions, even different theologies. The Second Council of Vatican gave us the opportunity and the big chance with the renewal of the theology, mainly with the Constitutionum Gentium, with Orientalium Ecclesiarum, with Unitatis Redemptigratio, but with the launching of the ecumenical dialogue and the interfaith relations and the openness to the society, to the big issues of humanity in different societies. We were happy with Vatican II, but at the same time, our previous vocation, mission to be a bridge between Oriental Orthodox churches and the Roman Catholic Church disappeared, and disappointed us in this approach. So the question of double communion that was always preached by the Roman Catholic, by the Greek Beltane Catholic, was not anymore, after the Second Council of Vatican, was not anymore credible or able to be developed. Although this fact, I would say that a project of reunion of the Patriarchate of Antioch took place between 1976, which started by a common visit to the both synods, the Greek Catholic and the Greek Orthodox in Antioch, and a common prayer of Vespers for once, and some pastoral collaboration. And then in 1981, Bishop Zoghbi published his famous book, Aren't We All Schismatic, which launched a period of reactions, reflection, common reflection, and maybe a dialogue. And this initiative was transformed by our synod into an initiative, a project of reunion with the Antiochian Orthodox Church. Unfortunately, in 1991-92, this project collapsed and was not anymore resumed by any of the parties of this, I mean, Greek Orthodox or Greek Catholic Church. What are the challenges and maybe the opportunities of synodality nowadays? I would say that the reception of the document of Balaman or non-reception, and that is a difference between the Middle Eastern Oriental churches and the East European churches, was really, and the reaction against the text was really different. Anyway, even the reception of the document of Balaman didn't lead us to a better ecumenical relation. Unfortunately, nowadays, we are observing and we are constating that in the three Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox patriarchates, Greek Orthodox patriarchate of Antioch, of Jerusalem, and of Alexandria, there is a kind of anti-ecumenical disposition against mainly the Greek Catholics and the Catholics and the Protestants in general. I would say if we really want to go further within our dialogue between Greek Orthodox and the Greek Catholics, we have first to ask for the recognition of our ecclesiality that comes, in my opinion, from the strength of the gospel before coming from an ecclesiological consensus or recognition. We are churches. We are not uniates. Secondly, I would say the big challenge today would be the divisions within the Orthodoxy itself, and mainly some exceed in nationalist feeling and project made. Anyway, there is today a big confusion between a living tradition and the local nationalist traditions or the conserved tradition, which is not living anymore. This is why synodality, as it is proposed by our Pope, our beloved Pope Francis, and which is rooted in a theological and canonical and pastoral roots and foundations that get back to the early churches, mainly in the Orient. This synodality is today not only a new concept, but mainly a new opportunity to be church together, to walk together, to care together of our people of God, but also to all people, all humankind, and even to care of the creation of God. This is why we have to enlarge our tent, to be less exclusive, to become more inclusive. The people of God is the whole humanity, somehow in a mystical way. This is why we need new cultural spaces, new anthropological and social approaches. We still are excluding each other. We are still excluding a lot of people, pretending in the same time that we are the church of communion and the church of the universal mission, and the Church of Universal Call of God to every creature, to every human being. So we have to heal from this kind, and I'm sorry for the word, of schizophrenia vis-a-vis of the concrete reality of the world and the life of our society. This is why ecumenism and ecumenical movement and ecumenical dialogue is not only a theoretical approach. It's working together in the service of the people of God, in the service of the humanity. So there are many, many challenges. And I would just say that during the last meeting, last 2 weeks in Frascati in Italy, to prepare the first instrumentum laboris for the continental stage, it was clear. And we listened to the people of God. It was clear that some issues are becoming more and more urgent nowadays in our working together, in our ecumenical approach, in our interfaith relations. I will start, for example, by the clericalism, by the issue, the identity, the recognition of the identity, the dignity and the role of women, of youth within our churches. And we have to examine the question of exclusion, any kind of exclusion in our church. We have to rediscover together the anthropological foundation of our theology, the Christian anthropology of the gospel, of the fathers, of the tradition, and to rebuild together a new approach for the working together. Finally, I would say that synodality is open new doors for us to approach the interfaith dialogue, mainly the dialogue with the religious extremist movement, mainly the Islamic violence as Middle Eastern, and to be more open and to listen what the human fraternity is giving us as chances, as opportunity to work even with those who could seem for us as the world enemies. This is the synodality of the gospel. This is the way that God Himself proposed to us. It is not easy. It's a huge challenge. But even as Monsignor Iwan said, primacy, collegiality, synodality, the role of the episcopacy, of the bishops, of bishop conferences, of the people of God, of youth, of women, of theologians, all these issues should be approached in a new way, in a synodal way. And I hope that our ecumenical journey would be inspired by this synodal path, and will offer to this synodal path a theological, new anthropological, new spiritual gifts. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor, for your this intervention, which I think enriches the discussion with this perspective specific to the Eastern churches and notably to the cultural and linguistic and theological diversity. And you've highlighted very well the importance of the ecumenical dialogue for Eastern societies themselves, I think. Now we will hear our last speakers, Reverend Dr. Oleksandr Lashchuk, who is Executive Director of the Metropolitan Andrei Sheptytsky Institute of Eastern Christian Studies in Toronto.
Thank you for the invitation to be here. I'm very glad to be here today. And the topic I've been asked to speak about is canon law and the ecclesial identity of the Ukrainian Catholic Church and the Eastern churches in general. Canonical tradition, of course, is one of the four defining marks of a church sua juris. Practically, for Ukrainian Greco-Catholics, that's two documents for those who don't know canon law. The 1990 Code of Canons of the Eastern Churches, and we have a 2018 particular law of the Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church. To that can be added a huge corpus of historical canons that largely remain in effect in our church. Since canon law is one of those four basic identifying features of our church, how does it contribute or hinder to our church's mission and identity as a major archiepiscopal church? When we speak of the mission and identity of our church, a question has to be asked, well, what is it? For example, just in a city like Lviv, one can find very different expressions of a lived experience of the faith. Despite this diversity, our church grows and expands not only in the canonical territory of Ukraine, but indeed throughout the world. A unifying factor of this is the common mission of the Ukrainian Catholic Church, our shared history. Sorry, I lost my spot. There you go, shared history, and the leadership, I think the leadership of the father and head of the Ukrainian Catholic Church. His beatitude has many powers in canon law, but more importantly, he becomes a point of communion for the members of our church. And that works both vertically with the Roman Pontiff, but also horizontally with the members of our hierarchy and their local churches throughout the world. It's our synod of bishops that really serves to govern the entire church. Our synod makes decisions that focus our church's mission. They establish projects for evangelization. They establish new eparchies. They elect bishops, which of course determines the future. They develop programs of formation for priests and laity, catechists. And of course, they issue laws for the entire church. This is a concrete application of the Second Vatican Council's decree on the Church, Lumen Gentium, that reminds us that historically, churches established in various places by the apostles and their successors have in the course of time coalesced into several groups, organically united, which, preserving the unity of faith and the unique divine constitution of the universal church, enjoy their own discipline, their own liturgical usage, and their own theological and spiritual heritage. It's those 4 points of tradition, liturgical, historical, spiritual, and disciplinary, that define our church and incorporate parishes into a single major archiepiscopal church, whether they're in Ternopil, Donetsk, Winnipeg, Melbourne, or Curitiba. However, the Code of Canons of the Eastern Churches clearly limits the authority of the major archiepiscopal church to what is called the canonical territory of that specific church. The Roman Pontiff, as the supreme authority in the Catholic Church, limits the authority of an individual Eastern Catholic Church. Canonical territory is defined by him, who alone is called the judge of interchurch relations. This canonical territory most often follows the traditional presence of the ancient churches, but that's not always the case. And as an example of that, the Ruthenian Greek Catholic Church, sometimes called the Byzantine Catholic Church, has their canonical territory in the United States, where, of course, there were no Greek Catholics before 100 years ago. And then one could look at the many regions in Eastern Poland where Ukrainian Catholics were present for centuries, and that also is not part of the canonical territory of the Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church. So inside the canonical territory, the Synod of Bishops and the Patriarch have a certain set of powers defined by law. Outside that territory, this is all limited. The Patriarch is only able to exercise his authority within what has been established as the territory. For example, he could erect an eparchy in his canonical territory. He cannot do the same for his faithful in another jurisdiction. In the canonical territory, he could transfer a bishop for a grave reason. No matter how bad the situation, he cannot do the same for a bishop exercising jurisdiction in the diaspora. Even the powers of the Metropolitan are circumscribed outside the canonical territory. And for example, only in the historical territory does he have that right to ordain and enthrone bishops in his province. Outside the canonical territory, the laws issued by the Synod of Bishops and promulgated by the Patriarch are only effective if they are liturgical in nature. If they are disciplinary, they only have force inside the canonical territory of the Church Sui Juris. So the Synod of Bishops is competent to issue norms regarding the celebration for the sacred liturgy throughout the world. It is not competent to issue norms regarding any other topics, such as regulations regarding temporal goods of the eparchies of the Church, a program of priestly formation, or even days of fast and penance. So while we have four defining characteristics of a Church Sui Juris: liturgy, spirituality, history, and discipline, in the current law of the Church, only one of these is universal, and that is liturgy. The current law of the Church does allow for some exceptions to these territorial limitations. The first of these is that an eparchial bishop could promulgate these laws of the Mother Church in his own local church. In this case, the bishop takes a law the synod promulgated, say fast days, and can issue that for his eparchy. The eparchial bishop could say, I'm going to follow the same requirements for ordination of seminarians that have been promulgated by the Synod of Bishops of the Church Sui Juris. This is limited by the fact that any local laws can only be within the legislative competence of the eparchial bishop. If it exceeds his competence, he cannot legislate on that topic. But it was interesting that this year, the resolutions of the Synod of Bishops of our Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church specifically asked eparchial bishops outside the patriarchal territory to issue decrees promulgating the disciplinary laws that are otherwise ineffective. Like that they asked, kindly asked to do that. So in the case of the Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church outside of the major archiepiscopal territory, we have a situation of almost voluntary participation in the church. A bishop may or may not choose to implement the various decisions of the Synod of Bishops. In cases where a bishop may even desire to promulgate the decisions of the synod in his local eparchy, it's possible they will be beyond his competency to promulgate. And of course, the next bishop is always free to revoke any and all of those promulgated laws. Sometimes the Code of Canons of the Eastern Churches even allows the faithful living outside the canonical territory to exempt themselves from the law of their church sui juris, and they can follow the local custom where they live. One example of that is on fasting and days of penance. The faithful are allowed to choose what's in practice in the territory where they live, which in Canada would mean 2 days of fast, Ash Wednesday, and Good Friday. That's all. And that's regardless of what the bishop says. The code allows for that. In the absence of any locally promulgated laws, which would be seemingly the situation, I think, in most, if not all, of the eparchies outside of our canonical territory, the faithful are ultimately in a seemingly lawless situation where they're free to follow whatever norms they wish. In such a situation, the mission of the major archiepiscopal church is certainly weakened, as individuals do not hold to a common identity or even a purpose. There is a second possibility for the observation of particular law outside the canonical territory, and this involves the Apostolic See of Rome. There are provisions for when a church sui juris desires to promulgate for the church throughout the world, such as possible if the Roman pontiff gives effectiveness to those decisions. That reflects the Catholic understanding of the Bishop of Rome's universal jurisdiction and legislative power as head of the College of Bishops. This can lead to what is called a special law, a jus speciale, for the church sui juris that binds members of that individual church regardless of their location. The downside theologically, it's effective, but the downside theologically that it would be really seen as a delegated act of the Roman pontiff. It's not a proper power of the church sui juris itself. So examination of these norms quickly points to the role of the Bishop of Rome and the Petrine ministry in the current law regarding the Eastern Catholic churches. It's the Roman pontiff who establishes the self-governing status of a church sui juris. He determines its canonical territory, and if there's a doubt, he clarifies it. Only he can modify the territory of a specific church sui juris, maybe to, for example, include a territory of migration neighboring the traditional territory. This happened recently in India when the Syro-Malabar bishops were given an extension to all of India as their canonical territory. Even more fundamentally, the Roman pontiff promulgates the law that defines the autonomy of an individual church sui juris. The church sui juris itself is a creation of ecclesiastical law, could be changed by the Roman pontiff at any moment if he so desired. The newly promulgated apostolic constitution on the Roman Curia, Predicate Evangelium, maintains this newly named dicastery for the Eastern churches to aid the Roman pontiff in his function of governance with respect to the Catholic East. So the Roman pontiff has supreme and full power over the entire Catholic Church. He has ordinary power over all the eparchies of our major archiepiscopal church. And that ministry of primacy is exercised not only by himself, but also by those who assist him. For example, the pontifical representatives and the Roman Curia. In recent months, it will be no surprise to you to hear that there has been controversy regarding certain comments of the Bishop of Rome regarding the war of Russian aggression. And this creates a situation where the faithful are frustrated by the actions, or sometimes the lack of actions, of their spiritual leaders. And this certainly has an impact on the mission of the church, when members of the faithful perhaps feel shame regarding their ecclesial affiliation. The faithful can find themselves at the mercy of an individual who has, as the code says, supreme, full, immediate, and universal ordinary power in the church, which he can always freely exercise. Canon law is ordered to the salvation of souls, and it stands to reason that when structures of the church are not conducive to that function, They should be reevaluated and adapted when necessary. The mission of a church, while tolerant of diversity, requires common structures and direction. At times, the current law of the church inhibits this, especially when one looks outside of the canonical territory of the major archiepiscopal church. Personally, I do not think it's realistic to expect the supreme legislator, the Roman pontiff, to change the current norms on the hierarchical constitution of the church that are contained in the Code of Canons. So the problem could be solved by local bishops promulgating legislation, policies, and other documents, such as programs of formation. But considering limitations of the approach, it can be more effective if a special law is developed and approved, giving the father and head of the church, along with the synod, a greater role in the governance outside the patriarchal territory. That would allow for strengthening of the church's ecclesial identity, subsidiarity in a reduction on the reliance upon the Holy See and the Roman Curia, a greater focus upon the mission of the church, and basically something critical in this period of extreme migration, which has been forced upon the Ukrainian people, a dedicated pastoral ministry. Thank you.
Many thanks for your conference, which underlines the canonical aspects of our issue. I think you highlighted very well the questions raised by the territorial limitation of the authority of the bishops in the Greek Catholic churches. So we have now more than half an hour for the questions. I think we can take 2 or 3 questions. Please, when you address a question, when you say a question, tell to whom you want to address, to which speaker. Yes, please.
Працює? В мене би було одне питання, подібне питання стосовно...
I would have one question pertaining to one and the same concept. I would address it to 2 people, to Father Ihor Shaban and to Father Gabriel Gashem. These are questions pertaining to the concept of co-Eucharist or double Eucharist. I will briefly remind, can Greek Catholics or Melkite Greek Catholics, in case of no shared Eucharism, no shared
Сопричастя одночасне із
Eucharist
одним...
between Rome and the Orthodox, to have this Eucharist when they are not in touch with each other, so that in this way Ukrainian
Питання для...
would be a kind of mediary communion for them. So my question to Father Ihor would be, before that, this concept you could find in official documents, first of all in the epistles of His Grace Huzar. I would correct here Father Iwan Dacko, saying that this concept of shared communion is not there neither in the first edition nor in the new edition of the ecumenical concept. As far as I remember, I may be mistaken, it was only in the epistle of Любомир Huzar. And that's why my question to Father Ihor is, why do I not notice now in our church discourse, I do not notice this concept? What made it disappear? I don't want to be judgmental here. I am just wondering why. What were the reasons behind? And my similar question addressed to Gabriel Gashem. Ukrainians, if they were developing this concept, when there was a group of Kievan church to study this issue, we got inspiration from the Melkite church. What about the Melkite Greek Catholic Church? Are they still speaking about this thing, or it is not mentioned anymore? So, but first, I would like Father Ihor to speak.
So, Father Ihor, please.
Будь ласка.
За ваші запитання.
Thank you, Taras, for your questions. Extremely interesting tendencies are happening in various scholarly environments. I think that the study group of the Kievan Church and me as a professor can always produce some hypotheses. And these ecclesiastic searches, the notion of double communion as a hypothesis has place in life, but for practical application, I think it's too early to speak about this as a practice notion. Although if no one is searching, then there is no move forward. That's why I believe that we still have a lot of tasks before our theologians, that can study this issue together with Roman Catholic theologians and theologians of Constantinople and other churches to seek. We are all in a search. Lubomir Huzar had his own views on these things, and he expressed this in his paper. And we are continuing this search. There is no final answer yet.
Thank you. Gabriel, do you want to answer?
Yeah, thank you once again for the question. I didn't hear precisely all the question, but I would say my opinion on the intercommunion problem, which is a crucial problem in our Eastern Catholic churches. From our Orthodox brothers and sisters, from a theological point of view, the intercommunion, the communion, Eucharistic communion should be the fruit of a full communion, mainly in faith and in other elements, and should not be a means to access to the fullness of communion. Meanwhile, I would say in our context in the Middle East, it's very crucial because of the mixed marriages and the pastoral situation where families are divided because of the mixed marriages and because the children are attending the same schools. Because they are living together in the same building. They are attending the same scout and the same clubs, and they are living together. I think that there is possibility to have a pastoral protocol together. For example, the Orthodox Metropolitan of Mount Lebanon, due to the pastoral complication, allows the people from other churches, the faithful from other churches, Greek Catholic, even Maronite or others, to attend communion, but ask the clergy and the consecrated people not to attend, not to receive communion in the Orthodox Church, in order to, in the same time, have a pastoral facilitation and a pastoral, I would say, rules, obligation, and to keep the theological, how to say, having the authorization of the of the bishops from both sides, and being in a difficult situation to to receive communion or other sacraments by a minister of the appropriate church. These two conditions are maybe the door that was open to go further. Anyway, what I would say as a theologian in context of the Middle East today, we have to pay a lot of attention to the pastoral issues, mainly after the displacements, the political instability, the moving of the people from one country to another country, from one region to another region, from one church to another church. I mean, the pastoral reality is much more complicated than theological aspects, and I'm sorry to say it, and canonical aspects, at least in our churches in the Middle East.
Thank you. Another question?
Not from me, but right through the Zoom from Zoom прийшло від професора Петроса
So
Василія.
there's a question in Zoom. It's a question from Professor Vasiliadis, and he contributed to the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. So his question is as follows: how can the UGCC help in promoting Catholic Orthodox union? I think it's a question to Mr. Ihor Shaban and Mr. Iwan Dacko.
Professor Ihor, Shaban, do you want to answer first?
Може, отець Іван хай перше, він вже тут піднімав руку, я вже
I think that Father Iwan can be the first one.
I have something to add what has been said. Regarding this dual communion, I would rather prefer to use the term contemporary communion. Не подвійне сопричастя, але рівночасне сопричастя. Now, even after Vatican II, it was permitted for the Catholic faithful to go to the Eucharist and receive communion from an Orthodox priest if a Catholic priest was not in the vicinity. The Roman Curia has always been against studying this question, and they called it sarcastically ecclesiological polygamy, отже, ecclesiologiczna mnohożenność, czy dwożenność. Well, that is cynical. So I think this is a solution. Second, to what Father Lashchuk said, well, please read my entire article, which has more than 30 pages. And I state in that article what Bishop Dimitrios Salachas, a known canon lawyer, respected highly by the Orthodox Church, who said, in the new canon law, there are 200 places where a patriarch or major archbishop or metropolitan has to have permission, the blessing, the consensus of the Roman bishop, which means the Roman Curia. So, third, the territorial and personal jurisdiction, which you clearly you presented it exceptionally well. Remember that even Pius XII, when he wrote his doctorate as a priest, said, apud occidentales lex presumitur territorialis nise aliter caveatur, that for the Westerners, law has a territorial character unless otherwise stated. For the Eastern churches, lex presumitor personalis nise aliter caveator. So for the Eastern churches, the law has a personal character unless otherwise stated. Regretfully, when Father Eugenio Pacelli became Pius XII, he applied only this lex presumitor territorialis. So when this document, I mean the codex, the code, was being in this phase of preparation, the Eastern Catholic metropolitans and patriarchs and whatever were asking for a personal jurisdiction also over the bishops and priests of the diaspora. And they came to a political solution, which said, you have to elaborate your own jus particulare, pomistne pravo, which has to be particularne pravo, which has to be approved by the Roman pontiff. And if you want more, you have to prepare a document and request for a jus speciale ad tempus, osobliwe prawo obmierzone czasom. Well, we Ukrainian Catholics have been working on the particulare, but we have done nothing to the jus speciale ad tempus. Now, Professor Gashem spoke of our churches as a bridge between East and West, Kirche zwischen Ost und West. Cardinal Husar was against this expression of a bridge, pons. He says, because people tramp with their feet a bridge. We have to be intermediaries between East and West. That means we inform or tell the West what the East thinks, and we tell the Eastern churches what the West thinks. Now, regarding this Roman Catholic and Orthodox dialogue, now I explained also in my paper, if you read it in its entirety, that we Eastern Catholics protested with Cardinal Kasper not to use this adjective Roman Catholic. We were asked to comply because otherwise the dialogue could be compromised. But I received a letter from Cardinal Koch, an official invitation to the next plenary meeting in Alexandria, Egypt, which will take place between the 8th and between the 31st of May and the 8th of June 2023, where it states, Joint International Commission for Theological Dialogue between the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church. Before it was between the Roman Catholic Church and the Orthodox churches. So now, at least from the Roman side, the Catholic side, we are considered in its entirety, whether Greek or Roman, or whether Greek Orthodox, Russian Orthodox, or whatever. So that is very important. I did not mention one important factor. Our commission wants to elaborate a special document on the Vatican I Council regarding the question of its infallibility. And here I come to the question of our friend. After the proclamation of this dogma in 1870, only once Pope Pius XII on the 15th of August 1950 proclaimed the dogma ex cathedra of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin. Although the Orthodox and Eastern Churches celebrate the Dormition, Uspenia of the Blessed Virgin Mary, it is as a consequence of it, she was also received in heaven. But the aim of our commission is to produce this document to simply state, let's not use this dogma anymore. Of course, we have a position in the Roman Curia, but this will be done. And finally, and I think Father Ihor will agree with me, our Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church supports whatever the Ecumenical Patriarch, His All Holiness Bartholomew I does in regard to Ukraine, and considers him the primus, the protos of the Orthodox Church. I know that the Russian Orthodox Church objects and says he's making himself another pope. Well, that's their opinion. I think, and without any political second thoughts, I am of the strong opinion that if we Catholics and Orthodox unite regarding the Orthodox Church with the Patriarch of Constantinople, even a large, rich Russian Orthodox Church will not be able to overcome. And I think
Please, can you continue?
I am not mistaken, but I am right that the Ukrainian Church is doing this. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Professor Ihor, do you want to answer too?
Так, якщо можна, кілька слів.
Yes, I would like to say a couple of words, if I may. Today, we are talking about identity within Eastern Catholic churches with the special emphasis on the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church. And I believe that today, and for quite a long time, the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church has been positioning itself as an entity that lives in the spirit of Christ's teaching. We have this church fullness in Ukraine, and Father Iwan mentioned it about His Grace Guzar. We don't really want to be a bridge. We are a church that serves its people in the spirit of Christ and salvage. And this is something that is inherent in the Roman Catholics and in the Orthodox churches. We live and work by the teachings of God and by the teachings of our tradition. And I'm sure that this example is the best thing that we can offer for Christians in Ukraine. Besides, our church has always put forward proposals for dialogue. I guess we are the only church that has been doing that. This division is hurting us. Father Iwan, it's difficult for me to state how we view His Highness Bartholomew. I don't really want to engage in these internal discussions. We can be rooting for unity, but I cannot really give any recommendations on how to view it. I mean, this is the internal matter of Orthodox churches, and we will just accept their stance. We see eye to eye here. I fully agree with you. Just one more remark.
Константинопольська церква
His
є нашою.
beatitude, Святослав,
І ми також не встидаємося і
and
постійно.
we all recognize the fact that the Orthodox Church is our maternal church and that we are in full communion with the Bishop of Rome. And this is something that we do not really want to brush aside. We view this as a blessing. So this is part of our testimony right now. If we are truthful, if we live in the spirit of our identity, then we will be a good exemplar to follow by both. Father, I fully agree with you. I'm not even going to argue with you. I think I said the same thing, but just using some different words.
Yes. Thank you very much. Another question?
Ну, у мене радше не запитання, а така ремарка.
It's not really a question, it's more of a remark. When we are talking about identity through mission, it's important to understand where this line is between mission and unitism. This is something that both Father Shaban and Father Dacko referenced in the context of the Balaban conference, but the Catholic Church is not the only one. The Orthodox Church also had this unitist project. It was a small project that was initiated by the Russian Orthodox Church long before the revolution. Then Father Yevgraf Kovalevsky developed this project further. And for some time, it was within the jurisdiction of Sergei Stargorodsky. And then when Metropolitan Yevrogi transitioned to the jurisdiction of the Constantinople Patriarchate, and then they migrated to the Russian Orthodox Church abroad. In the early 1970s, this small non-canonical entity back then integrated with the Romanian Orthodox Church, but after the Balaban Declaration, the Constantinople Patriarchy drew the attention of the Romanian Church to two things. The Roman Church was not really authorized to establish new local churches because these local churches were established as the Cyprus Church by the Universal Council or by the decisions of the Orthodox Church, the Synod of the Orthodox Church. In 1993, the Romanian Orthodox Church delineated from this entity, and this story is also related to Ukraine. In 1998, one of the Kharkiv-based bishops united with Germain de Saint-Denis, but it didn't really take a long time to convert the French into Orthodoxy because in 1991 this entity collapsed. And part of it moved to the Patriarchy of Constantinople. Some of it remained within the Romanian Orthodox Church. And then the story of the former bishop of the Autocephalous Church is known. In 2015, he reverted to Unionist canonism. And so the Orthodox are waiting whether Rome will revert back to the practices of the 18th century or whether they will revert to the practices of the Balaban Declaration. So we can see that we have some interesting links and interrelations between the Catholic and Orthodox churches.
Thank you very much. Do you want somebody to react to it?
Well, I could react to it. I would really counsel not to use the term unitism. You know, the paradox of this Balaban document is that no Orthodox church or hardly any Orthodox church recognized it. We Catholics did. Cardinal Lubachevsky wrote an entire pastoral letter, perhaps the best pastoral letter which he wrote during his ministry, on the that we are Ukrainian Catholics, that we are Orthodox and Catholic at the same time, simultaneously. This is our standpoint. And because Orthodoxy and Catholicism does not contradict itself, it just it complements one another. So let's stop using these offensive terms as uniatism, proselytism, and so forth. Let's forget it. We can't change what was in the past. Bygones should be bygones. Punto and basta. So our church has to work as an Eastern church in communion with the Bishop of Rome, which commonly is known as Eastern Catholic Church sui juris. Balamant was a document of the commission, which then completely failed the next session in Baltimore when they came over the Atlantic, and they were capable of only issuing a communique and not a document. So let's stop, and we have stopped to use this term. We have condemned unities as a model and a method. We have also condemned proselytism, not of just of the Catholic Church, but also of the Orthodox and Protestant churches or communities, and let's go from there.
Thank you. Another question?
Я також маю одне запитання.
I've got one question as well. At first, maybe just a brief reflection pertaining to the identity of Greek Catholics. This fits into the topic of our whole social ecumenical week. We've been talking about identity, about different identities that interact, like to be a French citizen and to be
і в культурному середовищі
in each other, to be a Ukrainian and to be within the Russian cultural
бути поєднані.
Environment means that they cannot coexist. They are contradicting each other. In the example of the Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, we see how it has two identities. It is Orthodox and at the same time in communion with Rome, with the Catholic Church. And for centuries, we have been witnessing how these identities have been complementary to each other. Sometimes really they were in tension with each other, but usually complementary.
У діалозі з Римом казали, нехай
Let's look at the role of the Orthodox Church.
що вони вибрали або.
Greek Catholics become either Orthodox or Catholics, either or, but we are offering both Orthodoxy and Catholicism. And we find this a mission of our church to unite something that is not being so easily united. And my next question, Father Oleksandr, is to you, pertaining to the canonicity of territories, a term that was coined during the first ecumenical councils. This term played its significant positive role, but at the same time, it's a bit obsolete in our global context. You, as a representative of a Ukrainian Greek Catholic Church, what could we offer instead of this territorial division of the Church? What can we offer as an alternative? Maybe we can some fresh vision to the whole Christian world. Thank you.
To see that the category as we've developed it maybe is less and less helpful in a world where migration is widespread. And for Ukrainians, it's not as bad as, say, Chaldeans, who feasibly in the next decade might not be in the Middle East anymore, right? But that's their canonical territory. So how can we help the Eastern churches survive no matter where they are? Because I think that's a good thing. We'll probably agree on that. And, you know, we have several million Ukrainians who have left Ukraine. Not all are Greek Catholic, but, you know, how many of those will come back? Will they be assimilated? Will they drive past 10 Latin churches to get to the one Ukrainian church? it didn't work so great in North America over the last century. How will this all work? And I think we need to challenge ourselves to think of new models to be pastorally effective, I guess, is my point, maybe. Yeah. But there's no easy answers, and everything relies on the Bishop of Rome as the problem, right? So, yeah. Juridically.
So perhaps, no, if there is no question, we will term now, we'll finish. So many thanks to our contributors. And
May I add something, please?
Excuse me. So you have a question for, do you want to react? Yes, do you want to react? Dr. Gashem? Yes.
Okay. Once again, I would like to thank you all, and I'm very happy to take part, to participate to this panel. And I will just say something. With the new synodal experience, I think that we have to have a prophetic voice and a prophetic way, not to turn always to the past, but to turn to the future where the Spirit wants to lead us. I respect so much the theological dialogues and reflections and the canon law approaches and studies, and they are more than necessary to our identity and to our mission. I would say let us redefine our identity through our mission. And the question, what could we bring today for the church as people of God and to the society? This would be our mission if we listen to the Holy Spirit, to the Word of God, and this would be our real identity. Concerning the question of models of unity, or model in singular of the unity, nobody can guess now what should be the model of unity, but we have some, I would say, criteria about it. We as Eastern churches would like to be recognized as churches within the communion of all churches, not only of the Catholic Church. Otherwise, and this is the temptation, is to get back to the orthodoxy. And there are tendencies nowadays in our church to become more orthodox than orthodox, but not being aware that we didn't reform the church and we didn't offer the orthodoxy what we promised to offer when we were reunited with the Roman Catholic, with the Latin Church. So please, diversity within, unity in diversity with differences, with the reception of differences, maybe would be the next model of unity, where every church is recognized because it is faithful to the gospel of God. It is celebrating the adoration of the Holy Trinity. It's serving the humankind and every human person in the world. The church who is walking together behind or in the steps of Jesus Christ by the strength of the Holy Spirit, I would say it, rooting or going for the Heavenly Father's kingdom. Please let us go out of the box. Let us think with reality, with concrete actualities in our church and in our world. Our churches are becoming more and more minority in a secularized society, in Islamic majority environment. We are facing a lot of challenges, and the primacy and the priority should be the proclamation of the gospel of God together with the new concepts, with the new way to work together to be a synodal church. Thank you, and I wish you a good evening, everyone.
Thank you for your conclusive remarks, very strong. So, Darash, you want to? No, please, you want to conclude?
Окей. Щоб завершити нашу сьогоднішню сесію,
In order to conclude our today's session, I would like to extend my gratitude to our panelists who participated in our today's, I would say, very interesting session, and who joined us from all around the world. Reverend Iwan Dacko from Canada, Dr. Gabriel Hashem from Lebanon, Father Ihor Shaban from Kyiv. I want to express our gratitude to our moderator and our French
Лashchuku,
who came over to us and who came over here from Canada despite very turbulent time. Fortunately, we didn't have any sirens today, but sometimes we can be interrupted by air raid sirens. They came here in these turbulent times, and we accept it as a huge sign of solidarity with us. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for participating to all those who were with us online and offline. Tomorrow we will have a lot of round tables and panels. Please follow the events. Using this occasion, I would like to invite you to the panel for which I am responsible. It's preservation of faith in the diaspora. We will have Boris Gudyak speaking from our Bishop of Philadelphia. It will be at 4 p.m. Also, I invite you to other panels that are waiting for you within the framework of our 15th Ecumenical Social Week. Thank you.